Anna turned every eye in the village as she trudged past with another clattering wagon load of battered fence posts and splintered timbers. Farmers paused in doorways to nudge their neighbors, lips barely containing grins. On the cafe porch, men sipped coffee and placed quiet bets on what kind of pile she'd build this time. "Maybe she's starting her own junkyard," someone whispered, laughter rippling across the group. Children mimicked her behind their mothers' backs, dragging fallen branches, calling it being busy like Anna. Still, she kept her gaze forward, braid tucked and face sunburned, stacking wood with a practiced hand, never minding the heat or the sideways glances. While others shook their heads, sure she was chasing fantasies or hiding from real trouble, Anna only wiped her brow and reached for the next post. It was the way she worked, patient, methodical, not a hint of embarrassment that made a few pause. If everyone else saw only garbage, what secret did Anna see stubbornly worth saving? The town had worn itself thin by late summer. Every building and field faded under months of relentless sun. Glare shimmered from tin roofs, dust hung in the air with each passing pickup, and the scent of dry weeds drifted through cracked screens at dusk. Fences that once marked tidy property lines now sagged between splintered posts, wire rusted and slack. They drooped like the men who mended them season after season, never quite keeping up with wind or time. Rows that used to be lush with corn and shade-loving beans lay bare, interrupted by stubborn sunflowers and the occasional patch of withered grass. The talk in the co-op and at church potlucks was less ambitious these days. How to squeeze one more year from stony soil, or who might finally call it quits and rent to someone younger with new machines. Anna's family homestead stood at the farthest edge of town, surrounded by the ghosts of windbreak poplars and a porch that had once gleamed beneath buckets of white paint. Now it was a patchwork of patch jobs, tar-papered roof, warped boards, shutters that banged against the siding in each afternoon gust. Still, there was a kind of battered dignity to the place, a stubbornness in every nail and angle, the spirit of people who believed one more harvest would turn it all around. Anna had always walked her own furrow, boots muddy, hair forever loosening from its braid, hands quick to pick up stray tools or gently cup a grasshopper away from sowing rows. Her early years were stitched together from mornings in her grandfather's shop, the air rich with sawdust and the crackle of the grain report on the old radio. Granddad taught her to measure twice whether planting a shelf or laying a seed bed, and not to trust a thing until she'd felt its weight, tested its logic, and listened to the land itself. By the time she was 12, Anna could fix a broken gate as easily as she could tell when the creek was likely to rise after a dry spell. It wasn't always easy being a girl in work boots among men who'd rather talk yield than listen to new ideas. At the grain co-op, her questions met with patience that was both kind and faintly patronizing. Some neighbors joked that she had more fight than sense, but Anna kept to her own counsel. Her loyalty belonged to her family's patch of stubborn earth, and her heart to the long view season after season, treating the soil and animals as partners, never property. She whispered comfort to worn-out mares and gently shooed barn swallows from half-built trellises. If she hunted for discarded wood and nails, it was because she'd learned from her grandfather that nothing worth saving ever got its value from a store, and that sometimes the outcasts built the strongest foundations of all. Desperation pressed in on every side as the long summer stretched thin. The well dropped to a muddy trickle, and each attempt to revive the battered irrigation system was met with little more than hissing pipes and leaky valves. Anna's father spent sleepless nights poring over bank notices, while her mother fell silent at the stove, every meal cooked with a careful eye to what could be spared. The last of the harvest funds had gone not to repairs, but to groceries and one final visit from the vet when their oldest mare went lame. With the farm's credit worn through and no money for repairs or commercial fertilizer, Anna scoured roadsides and vacant lots for any wood that could be salvaged. She toted home piles of broken pickets, snapped rails, and half-rotted posts, undeterred by the jeers that followed her cart through town. "Maybe she'll build a bonfire and roast our troubles," someone snickered loud enough for her to hear one afternoon. Even at home, her resourcefulness drew worried frowns rather than gratitude. Her parents spoke in guilt and worry late at night about the shame of losing the place, while neighbors' voices at the post office and feed mill grew more certain. The family was done for, their clever girls scavenging just one last, fruitless struggle against the inevitable. Anna's first build was a crooked line of raised beds, lashed together from splintered posts and scavenged pallet wood. She lugged buckets of worn soil and whatever compost she could steal from the bottom of old manure piles, tucking bean seeds and potato eyes in tidy rows. The beds wobbled in the uncertain wind, and a gust one night sent two collapsing in a heap, leaving snapped sprouts and scattered earth streaked with rainwater. Undeterred, she hammered together a windbreak from the sturdiest timbers, planting sunflowers and corn along its length, hoping to shelter the weak from the worst of the cold. That hope was dashed when a sharp late frost blackened the tips of her greenest leaves, turning promise brittle and brown overnight. She tried a new approach, digging a compost heap near the barn, layering wood shavings and kitchen scraps, turning it by hand each evening. But a careless step and a rotted post sent the whole pile tumbling, greasy water leaking into the chicken run and bringing a cloud of flies. When she planted peas along a new trellis, wild rabbits slipped through her patchwork fencing and left nothing but nibbled shoots and empty stems. Each loss stung more when paired with the village's constant chorus. "That girl's working harder than her father, but she's working foolish." Her mother, voice weary, begged her to stop, putting on a show with scraps and brambles. Anna, face red from more than sunburn, wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. It was the neighbor across the fence, arms crossed, voice dripping doubt, who said it loudest, shaking her confidence. "You'll get nothing but weeds for all that work." That night, with the moon high and doubts crowding her mind, Anna almost believed them. But as dawn crept back in, she rose again, shovel in hand, too stubborn or too broken-hearted to let her hope be scavenged as well. The storm that rattled windows all night seemed, come morning, to have left behind only more damage until Anna stepped outside and froze in disbelief. Where most of her new-planted beds sagged under fallen branches and scattered straw, the small patch tucked behind her hastily built windbreak stood upright, green and untouched. Even the tender pea shoots, so recently spared from rabbits, glistened with droplets but bore no bruises from the whipping wind. The difference inside the fence was striking. The soil was dark and spongy underfoot, unlike the powdery dust outside, and when Anna dug her fingers in, worms curled deep and content. Searching for reason, Anna unearthed her grandfather's battered field notebook from the bottom of her toolbox. Between smudges of graphite, she found notes on crop rotation, old sketches of bent wood used as both marker and shade shelter, and margin scribbles about letting the land teach you each season. Inspired, she began marking new rows and laying scrap posts to block harsh sun, mimicking the shifting advice left on those faded pages. Later that week, a neighbor boy lagged behind his friends and paused to watch her work. "Your field looks different, Miss Anna," he said shyly. The words, so simple and unexpected, made hope surge small but irrepressible through Anna's chest as she got back to work, more resolved than ever to see if the land would answer back. Anna set to work with a new fire in her hands, shifting fence posts not only for boundaries but as anchors in her evolving experiment. She buried some deep, laying them on their sides beneath garden beds to build hugelkultur mounds, their softening wood holding moisture and feeding the hungry soil below. Others she slanted along the rows, stuffing their bases with hay, so rainwater running down their rutted sides soaked directly into the thirstiest patches. No two pieces matched, but together they drew crude, beautiful lines across her fields. She fashioned looming trellises from the tallest beams, winding twine up their lengths to cradle beans and climbing squash. Morning glories twisted up to meet the sun, and for the first time that summer, bees buzzed thick along wildflowers she'd sown in the nooks between posts. All around, the broken wood seemed to come alive, giving shade to tender lettuce, creating warm pockets where tomatoes blushed early and letting cool air settle low across the roots each evening. The changes came by late June. Where once only dust gathered, root systems now pushed down through the loosened earth. Corn leaves unfurled taller than Anna's head, and sunflowers turned every morning to follow the light above her wooden patchwork. Even drought-stricken neighbors noticed her marigolds and basil crowding in lush along the fences, a riot of color and scent. Ask anyone in the village, and they would have sworn at season's start that Anna was planting disappointment. Yet soon, strangers pressed their faces to her rebuilt fence to marvel at beans climbing skyward in tidy spirals. Farmers walked her patch, tracing the maze of posts and roots, their skepticism dissolving into tentative admiration. "How'd you get that dirt to yield?" an old rival asked, genuinely curious now instead of mocking. When harvest arrived, Anna's family gathered armfuls of pumpkins, corn, and crisp greens, their laughter echoing in the gold afternoon. Local ag agents visited with notepads, and the regional co-op brought a photographer for the newsletter. Anna's mother wept softly over the baskets crowding their cellar, and Anna herself stood back, watching with a quiet pride. Her wooden maze, once the butt of jokes, had woven together hope, wisdom, and stubborn hard work into the farm's best yield in a decade, and won the kind of respect that only comes when you turn the scraps and doubts of a whole town into something nourishing. At the bustling county fair, Anna's garden display drew a crowd all its own. People who once laughed at her wagon loads of timber now craned for a closer look, rustling to the front of the tent to handle her twisted trellises and thumb through her battered notebook of sketches and notes. Farm wives, once wary, peppered her with questions about hugelkultur and pollinator borders, while old men squinted skeptically but stayed to listen, each quietly marveling at the bounty she'd coaxed from ruined ground using only other people's discards. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, begging to build gardens like Anna's maze, and Anna took the time to show them which seeds to tuck at the base of each post. Her grandfather, silver-haired and bespectacled, hovered nearby beaming, his pride quiet but unbreakable. When Anna glanced his way, she saw the old magic of his hope reflected in his eyes. The county extension agent offered to feature her techniques in next season's bulletin, and for the first time in memory, Anna felt as much a leader as a learner. The town's laughter had changed to genuine joy at possibility's return. Anna's journey became the story parents told their children that night. You never know what broken things might be waiting to grow strong again. In the end, it wasn't just Anna's land that was transformed, but a whole village's belief in resilience. Every fence post a new promise that ideas and people deserve another look before they're cast aside. Have you ever surprised everyone by turning something broken or dismissed into something beautiful, or proved the doubters wrong with an unconventional idea? Share your story or your family's own rural tale of making the most out of what others toss aside in the comments below. Your lesson might inspire someone else to try. Don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of hope, invention, and the quiet pioneers who remind us that every town, every harvest, and every new future starts with someone who sees treasure where others see only scraps.